Hi, I'm James, and this is Games According to Jaymz. In this episode, we're going to talk about having fun versus having to win in various games. Some have it more of a divide than others, but in general, we do have that kind of head to head personality types. Now, what I'm going to talk about is just to go in a little more detail is there's generally two kinds of players who play games. On one side, we have players who play to have fun. They want to hang out with their friends, just have a good time, play different things, etc. On the other hand, we have people who only play to win, or at least maybe not intentionally, but generally speaking, they cannot have fun unless they're winning. And if they're losing, they get frustrated, they get pissy, they get very hard to explain, but they don't become very nice people half the time. Now, some of you may ask, well, the point of a game is to win. Well, it is, but it's how you prioritize winning that makes the difference. Now, myself, I am someone as recent as 10 years ago who would be very much I'm a competitive person. If I wasn't winning or if I was having a lot of difficulty doing what I needed to do, I'd get very frustrated. I'd be, this is stupid and why isn't this working this way? Why isn't that working that way? Why is this like this? But in the last 10 years or so, I've morphed into this person who just goes to play. If I win, great side effect. If I don't, you know what? I was out doing something I enjoy and I had fun. Doesn't matter. Now, the other side of that is people who don't have fun while they're playing. It gets to be problematic because the people who just want to have fun start not wanting to play with these people. And I can tell you locally, we definitely have some people who I try to avoid playing, and it's because they've got this mentality where the focus is I have to win, rather than just playing. Now, that's all well and good if you're in a competitive environment. I get it. I've played in some tournaments, and going forward, I'd prefer to just not play in tournaments anymore. What you would call a casual tournament, I guess, would be acceptable because the vast majority of people going into a casual tournament understand you're not going there necessarily to try and beat everyone to a pulp because you want the first prize or whatever. It's casual. It's meant to come out and meet other players, play other players you may not normally play. And I've done a couple of those. They're okay. But I don't know if I'll ever go to another store championship for X-Wing or a regional for Armada or something, because trying to play with people who are hyper focused on winning is just, it sucks the life out of you. Because you're there, you're trying to win, but you're also trying to have fun. You want to talk to them. You want to enjoy their company. I understand it's a tournament, and sometimes the stakes may be a little high, such as at a regionals where you get a shot at a spot at national championships and such. But to be so hyper focused, I don't know. I can't put myself in those shoes anymore. I just can't. And it's not to say this doesn't apply to non-tournament style games. Miniatures has a more obvious divide, I think, because the head-to-head nature of the game at its default. But these kind of players exist within board games, within video games, because again, it's the competitive nature of the game itself. But it also exists in games like role-playing games like D&D. You have players who do this and do that, but it's it's a divide that exists, and it's a divide that can be a problem in a community when you have one group of players who are always, gotta have the best thing, gotta do this, gotta do that, and things like that. But and then you have the other side who's like, well, this is kind of neat, I'd like to try to do this. And then you get the competitive players saying, well, that's just stupid, it's not going to work, it doesn't work that well, why are you doing it? And this is where you get the butting of heads. Now, I'll start with RPGs to give an example. With D&D, or a game like Rifts, or even a role-playing game for Star Wars, you're going to get players who like a certain character class, or they like to just try to change things up. The true, I want to play something outside of my comfort zone because I think it would be fun. And if they usually play a fighter, they'll play a mage, or they'll play a cleric, or they'll play the more scholarly, adventurous type who isn't good at combat. And they're doing it because they want to play something different. They want to have fun. They want to do something that's outside of their comfort zone because, well, just because. For RPGs, you have the other side, which are players who try to min-max all their combat abilities all the time, and that's all they care about. They don't care about the story. They don't care about the abilities that don't affect combat, because they know at some point combat's going to determine the outcome of this adventure or this campaign or what have you, generally speaking. And they'll min-max abilities and attributes and skills in that way. And yeah, I can't. Generally speaking, they're called munchkins, is what they're called, because you min-max everything to be able to be a powerhouse all the time. And I can't see the fun in that. I just can't. As a game master, I will punish such behavior in one way or another, because it ends up not being fun for the rest of the players, and with this person dominating because they chose to be a munchkin. Now you put that into board games. Board games, it's a lot more gray area, because the board games rules are generally pretty cut and dried. They're pretty set in stone unless you're playing with house rules, and everybody plays by the exact same rules. The difference here is people who want to have fun are just playing the game to play the game, to hang out, talk and chat. The person who needs to win, they are letter of the law. They will backstab. They will do whatever it takes because they have to win. And that's just the reality. And I can't play board games with people like that anymore. It's just, I have trouble playing RPGs with people who are munchkins. So yeah, I can't deal with people who are like that, like hyper focused on, well, gotta do this. And that applies to video games too. Like, I used to be really bad at that when I was playing video games for the longest time. I would get so frustrated with a game. I'd toss the controller down or start just cursing at the television, stuff like that. It's just so frustrating. And I look back and go, man, I was an idiot. Like, it's not my fault I lost. Well, it's not the game's fault I lost. It's my fault because I sucked. And excuse me. And it's at the time you don't think about it, but definitely looking back on it, I kind of go, man, was I an idiot. And you get that with online games too. You'll have people saying, well, you cheated, or because they lost, or they'll come up with all kinds of excuses saying, well, I'm not used to this controller, oh, I don't normally use this player or this character, or oh, I'm not used to using this ability, or whatever it is, because they just don't want to admit that you might have beat them. And those kind of people, I really don't like playing. And it's just, yeah, it's just so frustrating to deal with people like that. Whereas if it's someone um, that just wants to have fun, you know, like, oh man, you kicked my ass kind of thing. I'll give an example. I don't play a lot of video games anymore. I haven't played a lot of video games in years. I'm really not a video game guy in this stage of my life. But I do enjoy playing the EA Sports Hockey, so I play that with my son. And while it gets frustrating at times, he usually beats me now, but I always make a game of it. Almost always make a game of it. And I think he gets a bit frustrated too, because it's like, it shouldn't be that hard. I should be beating you better or something. I'm not sure exactly how he looks at it, but it's definitely a style of game I enjoy. And we set it up so the controllers are more like the older Sega versions, so I keep it simple. And I always give him a run for his money. I occasionally win, but generally speaking, he'll win the games. But we play because it's fun. I like to think he has fun because it's a challenge, but generally speaking, we play because it's fun, and we kind of make fun of the game at times too, going, oh, that's a penalty, but it wasn't 10 minutes ago. Hello. And now the another example is with my daughter. She has a game called, I think it's called Dead or Alive. No, I've never played it. Like, I play Street Fighter. I usually beat her at Street Fighter when we play Street Fighter, because Street Fighter is one of the games I grew up on, right? So through the 90s. So I'm good at it. But she got this game, and I was like, yeah, I'll play. That's fine. We'll do best F5 or something. I've never played this game before, and if anybody who knows me about video games, I'm not a big current console guy, because I grew up with Atari, followed by Nintendo and Sega, where you only had 2 or 3 buttons and either a joystick or a D-pad to do everything. And now it's like, okay, you have to do right trigger, X, left button, D-pad. And it's like, no, I just need controls, jump, run, and shoot, or whatever the case is. So she sets it up, and we start playing. And next thing you know, I'm up to nothing, because I've actually won 2 straight fights. And while it's fun, she was frustrated and probably getting a little salty about it, because it's like, I've never played this game before, but I'm having a blast. And in the end, she ended up winning two of the next 2 fights. I ended up winning the last fight, so I won 3-2. But that's where things can get frustrating. But she never made any excuses. She couldn't use the excuse if she had never used the character before, because I had never even played before. So she at least had a better idea of the controllers. And yeah, I think she was a little bit salty about it, but she accepted it for what it was, and she wasn't making excuses by any stretch. So we had fun. It was time spent playing a game together. Same thing with my son with playing hockey. It's even when he loses, yeah, a little bit salty because he lost. Nobody likes to lose, but in the end, we spent time playing games together. You know, that's the point. The play of the game is to spend time with someone you like. Unless you're in a tournament setting, you're generally playing with people you know, and I would presume like. So that's an example of how it would go with video games. Now in RPGs, like I deal with people, not so much now, but when I used to role play more, who are always min-maxing, and it's just my best friend and I, we've actually managed to force somebody who's used to playing fighter type all the time, and we've told him, no, you can't play a fighter this time. You're not playing a fighter this time. You need to play something outside your comfort zone. And as frustrated as he was you could see he was having fun trying to figure out how to do this character and make things happen. And I don't think the competitive types think about that or realize it. There's enjoyment in trying to figure something out that you don't know, in trying to make it work and getting out of your comfort zone. But it only works really if you have some people there that are supporting you to do it. If nobody's there like, oh no, you got this, or you know, you could try this, or some other stuff, it generally falls on deaf ears, and you fall back into that pattern of, I'm playing what I know, I'm good at it, and I'm going to maximize it to the best of my ability. And that's where RPGs and board and RPGs can really have a gray zone, because yeah, you're supposed to work together. It's just those guys who always want to take the spotlight when you do role-playing games. And then video games, yeah, it's very much individualistic. There's not a lot of cooperative video games unless you're talking about something like World of Warcraft, where you have a group go out and do instances and side quests and whatnot. But then you have the types who are playing things like Battlefront 2, where it's very much individual, though you may be technically on a team, quote unquote. But you have people who figure out hacks so they can cheat, and I scratch my head at that. I don't understand. Like, if that's what you're gonna do, why bother? So you can stroke your ego and say, hey, I kicked all your asses, but you cheated. So no, you didn't. You had to cheat to do it. That doesn't mean you're any good whatsoever. You had to cheat, and that happens more with online play, thankfully, because usually the hacks aren't that effective in offline play, from what I understand. Again, I'm not a big video game guy. But this is where we're going to get to the meat of it. This, to me, is primarily a problem in miniature wargaming. And I've noticed it in a couple of different games already. And it's primarily where there are players I don't play. I try to avoid playing with locally in general, because if they're not winning, they just become miserable, and I don't want to deal with them, and so I try to avoid playing them to avoid having to deal with them being miserable, because they're decent people and I don't mind chatting with them about Star Wars or what have you. They're decent people. It's just once they get miserable, I just want to like grab them by the throat and say stop. So I'd rather avoid the situation by not playing them if I can. And then conversely, there's just as many, if not more, that they just play and they have fun. If they're losing, they're like, oh man, like dice just weren't with me today, or whatever the case was. The problem in miniature gaming, though, is almost every game has what we call meta lists. These are lists that are really, really good and make it easier to win, I guess, for lack of a better term. Just the way they're constructed and the way they work within themselves, they are really, really effective. People who need to win will play those lists, and they will play them over and over and over again, because they're only interested in winning the games they play. Now that's a problem. That's a problem at a community level. Not at a tournament level, but at a community level. Because if you keep beating people and you keep playing the same stuff all the time, people will eventually not want to play you. Especially if it's a meta list. And not everybody has the stuff to play a meta list. That's part of the problem with miniature gaming. Unless you go out and buy all the stuff the meta list has, you can't really run the meta list. So we do have at least one player locally who does that a lot in one game, and we have another player in 40K who really likes to spam cheesy stuff, and generally speaking, he's invited to tournaments, but he's not invited to casual play, because the people who run the casual play know they will have problems with people wanting to take this guy out, because he does not play casual. Even in a casual setting, he does not play in a casual manner, and that pisses people off when you're there trying to have fun at an event that's meant to be fun. And it happens in a couple other games too, like Hero Clicks and I'm sure it happens in Magic the Gathering and CCGs as well, because they're very confrontational, just like miniature games. And those people just don't want to play them, and that's the thing. It's people like me now, like myself and my friend Greg. He more or less runs the Star Wars community locally, and it's a matter of playing. We both think the same way. We play for fun. So any given night, if we're out, we're just throwing a list together for X-Wing or Armada or Legion, or in my case for 40K or Flames of War, Battletech. we're throwing stuff together. We throw stuff together to play something that we think would be neat to see on the table played. Do we think we'll win? Probably not. Do we want to win? Of course. We're playing a game that is determined by winning or losing. So the goal is to win in the end, because that's the point of the game, really. But we don't construct our forces, for example, to be dominant. We're playing stuff we think will be neat to play together, or we look at it and go, oh, that'd be really fun to try. So we're trying stuff out we may not even understand properly. The flip side of that is you get someone who is always studying the meta lists because he's always going to tournaments, going to nationals, whatever, and then playing us. And it's like, we're not going to throw things at you you're going to see, for starters. And secondly, we're not in the mood for hyper competitive play. We never have. Well, I haven't been with X-Wing and Gamez the last number of years. Greg was a little more hardcore, but he's more like me now. It's like, oh, you want to throw an X-Wing, a Y-Wing, and that thing on the table? Sure. But it's like we try to avoid playing certain people because of it. Because it's just, if we end up beating them, they become miserable and frustrated, and they're tossing dice, and they're like, oh, well, this, and they're coming up with excuses, much like video game people. It's like, well, if this didn't happen or that didn't happen, it's like, well, it happened. Get over it. Fly better, But the other side of that is Greg and I have tended to just play stuff together. Over the holidays, I had a week off just after Christmas, and we played a big Armada game, like a 2.5 times the size game you would normally play. We played a Grand Army game of Legion. Why? Because we could. It had nothing to do with competitiveness. It was we played to play. We had the time to play. We could coordinate our schedule to play, so we played. That was why we played, not because, oh, I want to kick your ass. We played to play. And there's other games like that too. For instance, with HeroClix, HeroClix is a collectible miniature game. You buy the boosters with 5 miniatures in it, and you don't know what you're getting. It's very much like Magic the Gathering, only with miniatures. You open your booster, it's a random draw of what could be in there. Much like Magic, there are some figures that are way more effective and powerful than they probably intended. There are people. It's curtailed a little bit in the last little while. There's a couple people who don't come out that often with this stuff anymore, but they'll bring out the figures that just will curb stomp you. Now, HeroClix is a superhero game. DC, Marvel, they brought out zombies. They brought out other stuff too. Now, think about this. You can play Batman with Captain America and Wolverine and Nightwing in this game. It's that you can mix and match like that much. Or you can have Spider-Man with, I don't know, Beast Boy, or Superman with Thor. That's how you can build this game up. But there's just certain combinations that work stupidly well. And there were a couple of people who would tend to bring those out. That's not fun. Getting curb stomped is not fun for anybody. And frankly, when I curb stomp somebody, I don't have fun beating them that badly. It's not fun. I feel bad because I don't usually build a list to do that. So when it happens, I feel bad about it because getting beaten that badly, or just getting soundly beaten, is not fun. And I've had it happen, and I can tell if the person is doing it because they can, or it's unintentional. You can usually tell, because if it's unintentional, they're the first one to say, oh man, I did not think that was going to work so well, or I didn't think those powers would complement each other that over the top. And you can just tell by their demeanor that they didn't mean to build a list like that. I had that happen at a 40K casual tournament with somebody. First game, he just stomped my ass, and even he was like, "Oh man, wow," just. And that whole tournament, he was apologizing to every opponent because he really didn't think his list was going to be that effective. But then you have other guys that are like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that's why I put it together because that, and every other, and I figured like it really take guys out fast." The second guy's the one I don't want to play because I nobody wants to get curb stomped. That's just not fun. Most people want to have a good, relatively close, competitive game, challenging game, and in the end, if you lost, you lost. If you won, you won. And that's the way I look at it. It's like having conversations with, well, I'm sorry, I'll say having conversations with smart people. Those kind of conversations, you can walk away either saying, okay, you've changed my mind, or okay, I've changed your mind, or we'll just have to agree to disagree. In the end, the good and, or actually a better word, the quality of discussion is what matters and what is enjoyable. Doesn't work so much when you're talking to an idiot who goes nah, or shows you a YouTube video after you've showed him peer-reviewed science articles, And it's similar in gaming. I think the majority of us want to have a good game, a quality game, a challenging game, and in the end, the result, if we lose, we lose. If we win, we win. If it's a draw, it's a draw. The fun aspect of the game is the quality and challenge of the game, not necessarily the result. And that applies to all games, video games, CCGs, miniatures, board games, RPGs. It doesn't matter. Most of us want quality of game, not victories and versus losses. And the second group of people who always have to win, they don't care about the quality of the game. They don't care about how much of a challenge it is. They don't care about how you feel about it. They don't care about your anything really, other than did I win or did I lose. That's a miserable way to play, and I don't care what anybody thinks. It's a terrible way to play games. It's a terrible way to play the hobby. It's a terrible way to take part in the hobby. And while tournaments are a big thing for things like CCGs and video games even, and miniature games and board games, not so much RPGs, but 4 of the 5 anyway, tournaments are a major thing. Tournaments are not, and I've actually talked to people about this, tournaments are not what drives sales of these games. They never have been. That is such a small segment of the gaming community that it's laughable to think tournament scenes are what drive sales and product, because it's not. It's much the same as RPGs. It's people playing at home, people playing their friends, building a local community to play with each other, not tournaments. And if your community is dominated by tournament people, I've found that, speaking with some other people who are in communities like that, the atmosphere is not fun. It's very competitive. It's very, I don't want to say cutthroat, but it's very competitive. And I couldn't take part in that. I wouldn't want to take part in that because I'm not that kind of person anymore. I haven't been for a while. I want to just go have a ball. And I can give you an example of someone I know. And his regular store is very loaded with tournament thinking people. And he goes, and every week we talk a bit about him. He plays X-Wing, by the way. And he goes, and he usually gets curb stomped, or he has a decent game, and he just gets outflown or what have you. But the people there are very much playing meta lists or doing things that lean towards meta lists and kind of They're very competitive, and they're they have a win first mentality. Now he goes to another store a little further away, and they're not that way. The majority of people there are very much, hey, we're playing to play, let's have fun, oh, maybe you should try this or maybe you should try that. There's a lot more camaraderie, there's a lot more assistance in saying you should have tried flying this way versus this way, or you should watch, if he does this, you should think about just peeling off and trying to set up again for a better pass. And they're more helpful and I don't know how to say it. They're more helpful and try to give advice rather than worrying about winning. And that's the whole thing, right? It's I don't think it'll ever go away. Obviously, it'll never go away because people just can be competitive by nature. But it's hard to deal with when you're not that person anymore. And it's probably, I don't know, it may be just as hard for them to deal with people who aren't interested in winning at all costs. And that's kind of the thing. Like, I don't know what type of players anyone listening to this are, but I know myself, I used to be the competitive type. I'm not even close to that anymore. I play to play. And, the whole point of this is we don't get into games for that. If you think about it, we don't get into games to do that. We get into games, we start playing a game because it looks like it's fun, not because we're out to win. And it's frustrating when other people just play because they want to kick your ass. So I'm gonna wrap up. So yeah, play your games because they're fun, and that's the whole point, is to have fun. This is James, and this has been Games According to Jaymz. Talk to you next time.